well, technically not first recorded version of Hypothetically Speaking, but in the post-college, actually, mostly kind of era of Hypothetically Speaking. Um,
Post USD for
Yes,
sure.
we
yes,
do have a resident college student, but
we do. I thought about that. I'm like, no, Allison's in college. That doesn't count.
Yeah, it's more rating than I thought.
One day.
grad school reading
Get
will get you.
get a
Grad
degree
school
in
reading's a
human rights,
lot.
they said. It'll be fun, they said. Nobody said that.
Yeah. It's like you really do get the dark academia, but it's only because you leave the library so late all the time.
Yeah.
Um, so tonight, if you have not been here before, I assume most of you watching are friends and fans and family, of course. But we are Hypothetically Speaking. This is our former college radio show. We talk about anything unexplained, unsolved, and unnatural. I'm Gabrielle Chance.
I'm Morgan Roberts.
I'm Allison Horkey.
So tonight we're going to talk about the Romanovs and the Anastasia Impersonators, which was a very big legend conspiracy sort of thing during and throughout most of the 20th century following the murder of the Romanovs, which it's generally kind of like it's called a murder. It's been like asked in the Wikipedia realms to be renamed to an execution. Personally, I'm calling it murder because we're not just talking about a ruler being executed, we're also talking about a family, including young children, which speaking of, trigger warning for this episode includes discussion of hostage situations, murder, harm towards animals, and harm and death to children. Um, so if any of those things are going to upset you, make your day worse, please maybe tune in for the next one. We have a couple fun ones already up that are about krakens and the dancing plague. So if that be more your speed, you can check out those and tune in next time we upload next month. But without further ado, could you imagine an execution going so wrong it took 20 minutes? After,
Yikes.
yeah, after being
Mm.
read the order of execution twice, the former Tsar Nicholas II Romanov was still stunned and unbelieving. As he asked, "What? What?" again, his captor simply said, "This," pulled out a pistol, and shot the last royal ruler of Russia in the chest. The following awful minutes would put an end to the Romanov family. Or did it? This act would lead to one of the most prevailing conspiracies of the 20th century, the potential survival of the lost Grand Princess, Anastasia. Um, you've probably seen the Don Bluth movie, or you know of the Lost Princess. Generally, I guess a note on language. The translation normally used in English is the Grand Duchesses for the daughters, but it is more accurate to what their actual titles were to call them the Grand Princesses, so that's what I will be using. I will also be focusing a fair amount on Anastasia. I will obviously mention other notes on the family, but she's kind of the focal point because she will be discussed later as the Lost Princess. Um, with that, we begin on the royal line. Always a fun discussion. I'm sure you know where this is going.
Oh, gotta love a family tree that's a wreath.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
Mm.
indeed. Um, so the Romanov line, in terms of like royalty, began when Anastasia Romanovna uh married Ivan the Terrible. Uh, Ivan trying
Iconic last name, really.
Yes. I've been trying not to be terrible as of History of the Entire World, I guess, fame. Um, so she was the first person to sort of make her way up into the like echelon of royalty from the Romanov family, which the the family had claimed in the past to be royal, but it isn't. We don't know really. It could just be like a climbing sort of thing. But
And
the rule.
what is being royal? Like that's very it's kind of all a construct a little bit coming from a very American individual. So like I get they're like,
Yeah.
oh, these bloodlines are divine and whatever like that, but eh.
It's all just sort of like held up by the church for the divine part anyways, too. So
As yeah, as someone in the United States, it feels very arbitrary to me personally.
It it definitely is.
Yeah.
Um but generally we don't know exactly when they rose to being the Romanovs, which was an adapted name from an old last name. But they did um eventually obviously come to power and held that power for several hundred years, I believe, was there sometime in the 1600s until um the deaths in 19 how do I not have I think it was 1918. I believe that was the correct
yeah, I
year.
was gonna say I
Yeah.
think it was I would say it's I was thinking 1917, but
Um, the
what year would
1917
it
was
be?
the takeover
Was the revolution?
of the Bolsheviks in October, and they were held for several months following that take,
Um,
which we will get into.
oh,
So
it's almost the anniversary
yeah,
of the revolution.
Yeah.
yeah,
It was July 17th of 1918.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Um, so Ivan the Terrible was crowned the first Tsar of all Russia, which was like obviously there was kings or rulers or emperors before, but this was the first of this specific title, which has also gone through many iterations. Fun fact I learned is that the term Tsar comes from Caesar. So it's
I
like
could see that.
the last part, this last syllable of Caesar, they use that as their term for emperor. Uh, I don't know if that's necessarily exactly etymology related or it was just a nod or just, culturally accepted, but kind of an interesting fact on I didn't know where that
I
term came
think
from.
that's I think that's sort of the origin of the German Kaiser as well.
Yes, I think
I
so.
could see it adding kind of a historical legitimacy to the title that they probably would have liked being the first of this specific line. Like they would have had to have installed themselves as an actual legitimate power, and I think tying
Mhm.
themselves to this old, well-known ruler probably assisted with that, would be my guess.
Yeah,
It's wild shot. There's no historical basis here. This is fully assumptions. Take it as you will.
yes, but
Hypothetically speaking,
Yeah,
not
I'm
fully assumptions, but damn close.
I'm not claiming that this is true historical fact. This is just my rambling guess.
yes. This is the girls podcast and it's I try to be better, but it's usually a day of research project on an idea that we like. So it will not be entirely extensive.
We lean
I
into
think
loose
you get
historical concepts.
I think you get pretty accurate data from like or accurate information from like a Google search that you do from us, but it's just more fun with us. So,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and we're not like sticking AI down your throat or anything.
the
Exactly.
worst, really.
Especially when it's wrong. Don't trust the overviews. They are not vetting the
Yeah,
information for factuality. It's literally just whatever is compiled from like the first couple pages of Google, which is
yeah.
not necessarily true.
Which I will say, if you're researching anything super specific or really in depth, you especially cannot trust it. I know for a fact most code written by Google AI does not work and is severely broken. So be cautious.
Yes. Um, just your friendly PSA. In this household, we dislike AI. We hate AI actually. Um, but so the line started from Ivan and ended with Nicholas II, the last Tsar of Russia. Um, so Nicholas took up the throne at 26 following his father's death. His father was 49 and died of, I think, like some organ
Old-timey
bursting
disease.
situation.
Oh, that sounds awful.
Yeah, I can't remember
Wait,
if it
what
was
was
like a
it?
pain organ burstings or organ infection of some kind.
Ooh.
Um
Either way, not good.
yeah, either way not good. I cannot remember it. I don't
I
think
think
it was
if you're dying at
appendicitis, but it
I
was
think
something
if
like
you're
that.
dying at 49, it's just not good in
No,
general.
Yeah.
it is not. Generally he felt very unready to take up the mantle and had was literally quoted saying he was not ready to be the Tsar. Um,
Well,
That would make sense. I can't
yeah.
imagine trying to run all of Russia. That
especially
sounds nightmarish.
especially considering the state of things in the 1890s.
Yeah, that'd be a hard pass for me personally.
Yes. So before being crowned, he married the 22-year-old Princess Alex of Hesse, which is, I believe it is pronounced Hesse. She was a German princess who took the Russian name Alexandra Fedorovna. She was a descendant of Queen Victoria, her maternal grandmother. Important for something in a second. I need you to know because I know. Also, young Nikki's third cousin.
Oh,
Not the worst
interesting.
cousin situation in a royal family, but still a cousin situation.
Honestly, I expected severely more concerning, so we'll
Yeah,
take it for that time period and being royalty.
we'll take it. It's not quite as bad.
At
Um,
least they're not like siblings. Oh, that's always the worst in history
mhm.
when you're like, oh, you didn't know. No, and then you were confused why you couldn't have children?
Hmm.
What?
I also just watched Crimson Peak, so it's really just
Oh,
right in the
yeah,
front of the
Oh,
brain right now.
that'll do it.
Um, Great movie. Definitely recommend. So they were married, quickly crowned in as Tsar and Tsarina. Um, and they had five children. Um, the first four were all girls, which was bad for them because, according to Russian law, succession was only through male descendants, as it often was. So their first children were Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. Anastasia was born in 1901 and was unfortunately met with general disappointment as the fourth girl. They were all hoping for a boy. Nicholas reportedly had to go take a walk before visiting his wife and
oh,
newborn child, which
that's
is,
not what
That's
you want to hear.
yeah,
That's a
that's
little bit sad, not
a
gonna
red
lie.
flag, truly.
like I get you're under pressure, but also that's a lot. Um,
Your wife just gave birth, dude. Like, no. That's that's not the response to that.
I'm, I mean, never been there, but can almost assuredly say fourth time's not a charm. Like it still
Yeah.
sucks, I'm certain. Um, Finally,
It's not a walk in the park,
not a walk in
that's
the
for sure.
park, certainly. Uh, so about 4 years later, so 1905-ish, they finally had their son, Alexei, um, who was the Tsarevich or the crown prince. He also, through his mother's line, and notably Queen Victoria, was very hemophiliac.
Yeah, that'll happen when you don't diversify your bloodline enough.
Yes. Which is obviously, yes, carried through the maternal line, and then also became a problem later because he was often in weak health, which um led to him, being sometimes bedridden. Smaller injuries could potentially be life-threatening, and led to a relationship with a certain someone who would become very important and influential in Russian
Uh,
culture in that sphere of
yeah,
time.
notably also quite notorious in Just Dance.
Yes. Um, so to set the scene of the fall of the Russian monarchy and the um political, what do you want to call it? The house arrest, political arrest of the Romanovs. Russia was under deep political conflict. Nikki did not do a great job. Nikki was a nickname that his family had for him, so I put it in a couple times. He wasn't generally a very good ruler. He pushed pretty hard for the 1904 war against Japan, which went not great. Um, if friends of the show remember when we talked about Lake Baikal, this lines up with about the time when they were also building the railway that went over Lake Baikal, which was very interesting choice considering it's a lake. Um, and I believe that part was temporary just for the purpose of transporting materials, but still train over lake. And there was very interesting Japanese woodblock style propaganda against Russia at the time that depicted trains and Russian soldiers falling into the water of Lake Baikal, and such.
Fascinating.
Uh, so that was an unpopular war, and it didn't go very well for Russia, and they ended up conceding whatever they had wanted anyways from my brief look over of that war. Um, so it just didn't go well for them, and it was very unpopular. There was also a field revolution of workers in 1905, and the entrance of Ra Rasputin, self-proclaimed monk and holy man, was a good friend of Alexandra, the mother, the Tsarina, and because of his claims that he could heal Alexei, who apparently he did help, and he was generally very good friends with the family, um, especially the children and Alexandra. Um, I don't have exact notes on what all he did, but kind of a party animal, and also should not have been given political power, but was. He was appointed to official position by Alexandra when she was in rule while Nicholas was gone, against literally everybody's advice. She put him into office, technically. Um, he is a footnote in the story, so we'll just say he was assassinated in 1916 under his own bizarre circumstances. Um, this did not stop, though,
He made a lot of people unhappy.
it was a
He was an
lot.
odd, shady man.
He was. Um, this led general distrust against the monarchy, as well as like anything he did didn't really work out well. So even after his assassination, there was a women's march in 1916 that again just promoted this feeling of disdain. Um, there had also been a general anti-aristocratic sentiment led by Vladimir Lenin throughout the very late 19th and obviously into the 20th century, with some of his own writings and the creation of his party at that time. So then kind of the capstone of all of it was World War I generally being a bit of a disaster for Russia as well. So with all of these factors in mind, um, the decision was made that Nicholas would abdicate the throne. And he also, on behalf of Alexei, because of his poor health, abdicated. So they were both abdicated from the throne. Nicholas's brother was very, very briefly instated for literally a day before he also abdicated.
To be fair, I could see that being a big enough mess to be like, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Oh yeah, because you know you're gonna get super murdered about it.
Yeah, that does seem to be the vibe of the time.
One would hope to avoid super murder.
Sorry.
It's like not funny, but it kind of is.
It's funny in the way of it's a very yes, hello.
It was a very long time ago.
It was a
Is
very long time
what
ago, and it's sort of like watching like it's kind of
a
like the
soap opera or
it's like a
something.
soap opera. It's like
Yeah.
the everything is just it's all the spaghetti is filling everywhere. And it's like dude,
It's like the chili scene
it's
from
the
The Office.
chili scene from The
Yes.
Office. Of sorts. Like you're just watching it and it just keeps getting worse. So there's humor in that. It's just like it's an impossible situation. There's of course the people are incredibly angry. Of course nobody wants to run it. Of course there was deep unrest. Um so after abdicating, everybody was put under house arrest. So Nicholas, Alexandra, the Tsarevich, Alexei, and the Grand Princesses were under house arrest by revolutionaries at Castle Alexander near St. Petersburg. They did have a chance at one point to be exiled to Britain, but Nicholas's cousin George V took back his offer of asylum due to political pressures. So there was at one point a way out that could have possibly avoided what eventually happened to the family, but that offer had been rescinded before they could act on it. The family remained bored but relatively safe. Anastasia had penned letters to a friend, talking just about how nothing really happens and they were fairly bored. They were allowed to like grow vegetable gardens. Generally, they had a pretty good relationship with their guards as well, especially the young princesses. They were very well liked. Obviously, they were quite charming. Um, and they remained there until the takeover of the Bolsheviks in October of 1917, which is the revolution that you were talking about. Um, so the this was the party that gets talked about when like we talk about uh the sort of rise of like Soviet Union era Russia. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens. I don't know all of it, but that is at this current point that they're at what was happening in 1917. Um, they were generally moved around at this point a little bit, as well as way more heavily restricted in what they could do. They were no longer allowed very much time out. Their guard was switched. Obviously, they didn't want people who were liked and were very sympathetic to the family guarding them. Um, they were moved into Siberia and then eventually into the mountain, a village near the mountains, specifically to a house that was known at the time as the House of Special Purpose, um, which obviously becomes very devastating in hindsight. Um, so they were held here. They had like one cracked window. The windows in general were like newspapered over and then painted over, um, which led to June of 1918, which was the planning of the execution. Um, it had been decided that it was not in their best interest to keep the family alive because they didn't want the anti-Bolsheviks to have a living emblem to rally around. But the thing was, they also had to keep it pretty secret because the disposal of this was important because they also didn't want them to have a martyr to rally around. So I'm gonna try and keep it as I guess not as brief as we would on the radio, but I'm not gonna get into too deep of details. But this is where it gets sad if you needed one more warning. So this is the night of their execution. So this was July of 1918. Uh, Assailants were assigned from the guards, and there were still some that had some emotional attachment to the family, especially again to the young girls. So many of them got like belligerently drunk the night before just to deal with what they were about to do. They were specifically assigned a target, a victim, um, and then there was a note in one of the things I watched that the youngest executor was only 17, so the same age as Anastasia at the time. Um, the family was woken up in the middle of the night by their doctor, and they had some people with them, like retainers of sorts, who had kind of been chipped away at over time. People had been sent off, executed, never come back, but the family obviously had no news of them. But they still had 4 servants, a cook, a maid, and 2 others. I can't think of their role at the moment. Um, or no, one of them was a doctor, and then there was a 4th one. But the doctor had been asked to wake up the family. They had been moved down to the basement at about 2:15 a.m., being told that they would be moved into a new safe house. Someone, either Nicholas or Alexandra, had asked for chairs for Alexandra and Alexei. Alexei's obviously still in rather poor health. In the earlier days of their captivity, the girls had been in pretty poor health as well because they had contracted measles. Um, so they were taken to the basement to be executed or be murdered. They had a truck that was to transport the bodies to a pre-planned out mine out in the yard, and they had asked the driver to essentially rev the engine in order to cover up the sound. Um, and that's when, as I sort of opened with, the Tsar was read his order of execution. He was confused, asked for it to be read a second time. This was granted, and then as he still was sort of confused, stuttering, he was shot. Um, Following this, everybody shot, but it was very like the plaster and the like smoke from the guns and things, it literally made the room smoke up so much they had to open up windows in order to clean out some of the smoke so they could see. And it quickly became clear that only the Tsar, Tsarina, and 2 servants were dead. At that point, all of the children were alive, and other than Tatiana, who had ran to the door and been shot in the thigh, the rest were completely unharmed. It seemed like the bullets were literally bouncing off of the girls, which was learned to be because they had been taking all of the royal jewels and sewing them into their corsets. So they literally had sort of almost like pseudo bulletproof
Armor almost.
armor. So there was continued shooting and then bayoneting of the rest of the family. So in total, all 7 of the Romanovs and then the 4 servants, as well as Anastasia's dog, Jimmy, were all killed in that 20-minute span. Nicholas was 50, Alexandra was 46, and then the children, Olga was 22, Tatiana was 21, Maria was 19, Anastasia was 17, and Alexei was 13. as the bodies were taken out, one of the girls, either Maria or Anastasia, was claimed to seemingly spring to life and begin screaming. They were quickly killed after this. This, like I said, it took about 20 minutes, which is an absolutely abhorrent and insane amount of time. And the disposal was not clean nor like easy either. Everything continued to kind of go shoddily. They used a couple different methods to disguise the identities of the bodies. So they had used pistols for the execution because the like lead like person in charge of their uh like captivity had said that rifles would be too loud, but then they decided they were going to use grenades to essentially maim the bodies enough to make them unrecognizable, as well as using acid to do the same. They had pre-planned out a mine shaft that they were going to drop the bodies into, but it turned out it wasn't big enough or it wouldn't hide them well enough. So, and on the way over to that mine shaft, the truck they had got stuck in the mud and broke down. So they had to get out the like carts essentially to carry the bodies the rest of the way. So everything happened at about 2:15 a.m. They didn't actually get around to being able to bury the dead until like 7 in the morning.
That is wild. That's a long time.
It's a very long time.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy that it's just, and I don't mean this as a generalization on like Russia as a general like rule, but in the stories we've covered on the show, especially like the train over by like Baikal, the Chernobyl disaster, and then this, the all of the established like governments at the time were just kind of in chaos all the time is what it seems like. It just seems exhausting is my general
Yeah.
like takeaway from specifically these periods. I don't want to generalize everything. Obviously, we know there's a lot of stuff with that, but
There was a lot of historical conflict and stuff at the time, and the amount of organization was generally seemed to be lacking in some of the planning and
Yeah.
foresight of things.
yeah.
Well, and you couple that with this incredibly huge area of land
Yeah.
Yeah,
to manage too, which doesn't
it gets
make
overwhelming,
it
I think.
easier. But
I
yeah,
also,
like you have a disorganized
yeah,
government in a number of different ways on top of managing a very, very large territory with in the midst of, I think, political strife pretty much throughout all of its recent history, arguably longer.
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Um,
and in some of this era, you see some of the rise of some of the level of spying and things like that. So there was a lot more secrecy in government because spying was such a big deal at that point in time. And like information was so important that they didn't share things out as freely. And I think that caused some of their problems is they were trying to insulate things to reduce risk. And then there wasn't enough communication to like fix things before there were problems. And it just made things so much worse, I think, for their just general government function because they were trying so hard to be on some level secretive towards outside kind of enemies, I guess.
well,
Yeah.
also, I mean, towards the population in
Yeah,
general too, right? Like
yeah.
it's sort of
Russia at that
both.
time was not terribly open to their general people.
No. And there's been a thread throughout generally of whoever is in power is doing about everything they can to be absolute and completely unable to be wrong, which is something we saw, I think, most transparently with Chernobyl, of these machines can't fail because they won't,
Because I
sort of
said so.
mentality. Um, and yeah, obviously there's a lot of reasons why that was the way that it was at the time, and continued to be that way for a long time. Uh, just an interesting through thread with these stories we've been talking about. Um, that sort of, yeah, like bolstered attitude as well as like need for secrecy definitely led to some really like heinous communication issues throughout. Um, and this, I think, a lot of it was the essence of secrecy against, because not only was the dominating power kind of all over the place and new and trying to establish themselves, there's also a rising, like, uh, royalist sort of movement that's against the Bolsheviks, as well as other various factions that they're trying to keep all of this hidden from. Which somehow they do manage to do fairly well, which is we'll talk about in a moment. Um, so what they ended up doing, because the mine shaft would not work, is that they dug two graves. We know now that Alexei and one sister were burned and buried separately. So they were two bodies in one grave. The remaining nine bodies, including the four servants, partially in the effort of keeping them from being as easily identified, were buried in one grave about 70 feet away from Alexei and the daughter. And they were, again, kind of doused with acid and buried. This is when lid was entirely shut on almost everything that happened here. Nicholas's death was announced to the public and backed up by the government, not as something that they did, but something that aligns with the current republic's values. That Nicholas the Bloody, which was the moniker they used, had been killed, and that was a just thing. But it was said that Alexandra, and specifically Alexei is mentioned, um, in this particular news article, were moved somewhere else safely. Um, so it was general belief to those who took this word as truth that Alexei and Alexandra were safe. They also made claims to Germany that Alexandra and the Grand Princesses were safe because obviously Alexandra is from Germany. And then the daughters are half, obviously, so they have some connection to them. And there had been a recent peace treaty made with Germany that they did not want to upset under any circumstances. And this comes back around to George V, who didn't allow the family to be exiled to Britain, because that was a good part, that was a good cover story for them as well, is that the Soviet Union would largely blame Britain for the assassinations. And this idea is, I learned, actually still held up in Russian leadership to this day. That is what happened, actually. This continued through to be perpetuated throughout even the finding of the bodies. A scientist found the grave sites of the Romanovs, and
For how big Russia is, that's wild. To
yes.
stumble upon that specific spot out of all of Russia is
I mean,
a lot.
There was a general idea and rumor of where it happened, especially
Okay.
because the last house they were held in, it was known that the family was there.
They'd be a geographic region at least.
Yeah. So that they found the bodies in that forest and were forced to bury them again because at that point they were like, no. Well, first of all, they were like, that's definitely not the bodies, and also buried them again because it's definitely not them. Um, but from one of my
Hmm.
videos, I learned that the head scientist apparently took the skull of Nicholas and kept it under his bed for several months.
That is wild behavior. Why
That's
would you want that?
unsettling.
I don't
I
know. It does.
That's one heck of a keepsake.
It really, apparently, it's not that uncommon in these kind of excavations either, I've learned. Which leads to I have an idea for a Halloween episode about iconic skulls. We
I
can,
think I understand how the bodies went missing in
yes,
North Dakota.
it's not quite a North Dakota situation. The
But
bodies
like wild nonetheless.
definitely. Um, so later the bodies were properly exhumed, um, and tested against living relative DNA, which again, the whole cousin situation with the royal families, we had actually a fairly okay source to determine if the remains were that of the Romanovs. Um, which we'll get into that a little bit after we start to talk about the Anastasia claims. Because the two bodies, so Alexi's and the sisters, had not been found at that point. And obviously, due to the propaganda that was spread at the time, this was a big spark of the claims that specifically Anastasia had survived and was alive somewhere. Many claims were made for scams, propaganda fame, or unknown reasons. One thought was that there were sympathetic guards left with the bodies at the time between the bodies being transported to their eventual grave site and the execution. So the there was a thought that potentially if one person was still alive, they could have been escorted out. Um, there's a couple other ones. There's one specifically that you might know about that's very famous. Um, the there was a supposed sighting. 8 witnesses reported recapture of a young woman after an apparent escape in September of 1918 at a railway station northwest of Perm. Um, they saw they identified the girl as Anastasia based off of photographs. Um, the physician who had seen to her also apparently said that she had claimed to be the daughter of the ruler and she was Anastasia. Um, there were also several reports at the time of young people passing themselves off as Romanov escapees. Funnily enough, there was an interesting connection here. One Boris Solovyov, who was the husband of Rasputin's daughter, would defraud prominent Russian families by asking for money for a Romanov imposter who was trying to escape to China.
Ah.
So kind of the original um Nigerian prince scam, if you will.
It really, really is. But it spawned a movie with some fabulous dresses, so
Yeah.
there's
True.
that.
And that was what I thought of when I heard about the train story, was immediately about Anastasia,
Yeah.
wondering if that specific story was one of the inspirations. I don't know. But again, great movie, definitely recommend. Got one of the sickest villain songs ever, which fun fact, um the voice for the singing for Rasputin and Anastasia was not by his principal voice actor because I can't remember if it was his voice just didn't work or if he was sick or something like that. But the person who ended up singing for his song is the same guy who voiced one Winnie the Pooh.
It's a weird resume. Quite the combo to be sure.
It it's like how it's like to me how hot I can't think of Mark Hamill was like the most iconic protagonist of all time and then only played villains from that point on.
Yeah.
Basically. Sort of vibe. Um but yeah, anyways. So they this was a potential like claim that there was Anastasia. There were several people just kind of scamming people with the claim that they were one of the lost Romanov children. Um and then another kind of again lesser known but still relevant claim uh claimer, I guess you would say. There were two uh Nadez Nadezhda and Eugenia. So Nadezhda Vasilyevna Yeva. I'm so sorry. I
The
deeply
Russian
apologize.
alphabet is hard for Americans.
And
The names have so many so many
so
so
many
many sounds.
syllables.
There are things that use like Russian letters with sounds that we don't have in English at all. So
Yeah. Nadezhda Vasilyeva and Eugenia Smith. Um, two young women claiming to be Anastasia and her sister Maria. So the third and fourth daughters, who were reportedly very, very close as children. They were almost inseparable, um, and known as sometimes as the little pair. Um, and then the two older sisters were known as the big pair. Um, I
kind
believe.
of sad.
Yeah, like
Mm.
the say what you will and like about like monarchy and revolts against monarchy. Obviously, we can look at the effects and think, was this really a better outcome? But truly, we don't know because
Yeah.
we did live in a timeline where these revolts happened, and there were
Yeah.
understandable reasons for them occurring.
And you
We
can dislike a system, but to murder children seems a little far to me personally.
exactly the you can think, yeah, like we hate the monarchy. And in many ways we do. But I don't think that murdering the children
Yeah.
of said ruler was ever
I'm gonna
a good thing or a just decision.
Like
yeah.
they had to swap their guards because they were nice enough that their guards liked them. Like their guards
Yeah.
liked them enough that they were
Yeah.
worried that they hid them away alive. If you're genuinely that likable and come off as being that kind and you're a child who had no say or control over anything that happened, that's a wild solution to me personally. I get
Yeah.
that part of it is if there's living members of the family, then their hold and power of the region is diminished, and I'm sure that's why, but that doesn't make it not incredibly messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna go on the record and say that it's just never okay to murder children.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
Um
blanket full
hot
A
stop.
stance we can all rally
yeah.
behind.
I
Yes.
I think that you know there is an argument to be said about bloodlines and stuff like that. There's a side, maybe something to be said about like, you know, providing that like bloodline for um, monarchy, like people who back the monarchy. Um, and that being really important, but at the end of the day, like you shouldn't kill the children, you know?
Yes.
To
Like,
come forward and be like, this monarchy is so awful and so terrible and so evil, and we're going to combat that and fix that by murdering children is a
yeah,
wild, it's such a weird solution to me. Like, that's not, you are not better. You are just a
yeah.
different kind of bad.
Yes. Which we got
Well, and I
plenty of
think,
evidence of going forward as well.
Yeah.
yeah, I do think that's where you sort of see this kind of, I mean, obviously, like throughout leading up to the revolution, there was a lot of propaganda, but I think that the murdering of children who realistically didn't, were not like did not have any kind of ability to impact policy or do anything to like cause pretty much anybody's current issues that they may have had. It's problematic for sure.
Yes. Um, that's definitely like it's one of the sticking points of this story, and part of why it's so sad is like in general we don't grieve the victims of the French Revolution, but it's specifically the innocents involved that were really what made this so impactful. And part of why it became these rumors popped up so much was that there was this sort of hopefulness. It sort of made it less tragic. If there
Mm,
was a lost princess, a last survivor of this line, someone who made it out of this abhorrent situation. Um, so the last of our so we have our two people who are claiming to be Anastasia and Maria, and then we have one other person who claimed to be Anastasia. Um, so the two young women were taken by a priest in the Ural Mountains, which is where the village was that the family was executed. Um, in 1919, where they lived as nuns until their death in 1964. They were buried under the names of Anastasia and Maria. Uh,
wow.
so we do know their original identities, and I there's not very much known about them, so it's really hard to gain a motive. But if they were just, you know, taken away
Living as
to be
nuns.
to be nuns, then I don't
Whatever, I
know.
guess.
It's such an odd situation. There was some identification done of some of these people claiming um specifically a relative. Oops. Where did that one go? Um Princess Helena Petrovna, who is the wife of Anastasia's distant cousin, Prince John. Oh gosh, Konstantinovich. Oh, that wasn't that bad. It looked scary. Of Russia. Um, they had seen a guard brought a girl who claimed herself to be Anastasia. Um, and she said that she did not recognize the girl, and the guard took her away. Helena, during the family's captivity, had attempted to see them in that final house that they were held in, and she was not allowed in by the guard. Um, so she had a fairly strong connection with the family, it seems. Like, it seems like she did care for them a bit. Um, and so she was used at least once to vet these people of if they were actually Anastasia, which is why this last case is very interesting. Um, so the most famous person that claimed to be Anastasia was Anna Anderson, is what she is known as. So She was institutionalized in 1920 after jumping off a bridge. And she used a couple different names, eventually landing in March of 1922 that she was Anastasia. And she would uphold this claim that she was Anastasia for her entire life. And this gained very large public attention, um, including people who knew Anastasia when she was alive, who weren't entirely sure that she wasn't. Like, many of them believed she was an imposter, but she also knew a lot of stuff that wasn't super common knowledge, would be things that Anastasia would know. Um, and she was actually often visited by members of the family, the extended family of the Romanovs, because of this. So it was just such a bizarre situation. She couldn't prove she was Anastasia, but no one could truly prove she wasn't, at least not at that time. Um, so she like lived in Germany until she eventually moved to the United States. But upon her death, her body was cremated and her ashes were buried in Germany. That was in 1984. Um, they I don't know. There's like not a whole ton that I have on her specifically, other than she is the most famous and had the most convincing story. But it's so bizarre to me that people who knew the family when they were alive weren't entirely sure that it wasn't Anastasia.
Mhm.
Um, this was proven to be false though after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the locations of the bodies of the Tsar, the Tsarina, and all five of their children were revealed. And there were multiple labs in various different countries that were able to confirm the DNA using different testing. And this was also a bit of a pet peeve for Russia because at the time they did not have the technology in order to do the DNA testing themselves, so they had to outsource to Britain, which was a big point of uh friction for them because generally the story was also that Britain was to blame for it, was one of the things that they said. And they but their science was behind because I don't have the exact quote, but I talked about it before we were live. That there was a quote from someone, a contemporary of the time, a scientist, where it was like, we did have a department on this, but then Stalin had them all shot, so it really put a wrench in things. Which is,
Nothing quite like your government saying, please stop doing science.
yeah. Um, I not apparently wasn't important enough, or they did something, or whatever reason there was. Um, the they were able to, when they finally had the bodies do the DNA testing, confirm that the skeletons were those of the family. And they were also able to match Anderson's. They had a lock of her hair as well as a sample from her, I believe, pancreas tissue or intestine tissue, something like that. They were able to see, yeah, no, she was not at all. She was Polish. She was not Anastasia. She was identified as Franziska Shanskowska, Shanskowska, something like that. Um, which I don't know, there's something of living with the lie the entire time that's also like deeply sad and also confusing to me of why you would uphold this crazy lie your entire life and not even like give it up in the end.
Did
Yeah.
they have you seen anything on if they had any remaining like family or anything like that? Because if you don't have family and you don't have a connection to anything else, it makes a little bit more sense to me how you could do that. But if you're connected to people and you have existing family and things like that, I struggle to see maintaining that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
And again, this might not be in the articles and things that you've looked at. So if you
Yeah.
don't know, that's fine. I just, that to me would be the only thing where I could see maybe being able to do that. But like,
Yeah.
that would be a lot.
Yeah, if it's like sort of because of, I don't know, for like escapism almost,
that
I
could
could
be.
see somebody doing that, or if they have maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there were, or if she had like maybe some kind of mental health condition.
Which she definitely did. It's from the 1920s, so it's not super well understood maybe what she was dealing with. Obviously, she had some suicidal ideation. Um, she I could definitely see it being something with loneliness or like
Mm,
again feeling that connection to something. Um, just an interesting sort of sad mystery in her own case of what
yeah.
led her to it and why she took up this identity and like what did it do for her, I suppose, of like how did it make her feel better, that sort of thing. Um, yeah, so that was as she's known now, Anna Anderson, who yes, was not connected, but this takes us to when they were able to DNA match for the bodies. So they were able to identify the bodies in the first the bigger grave of the two rulers and then the other three children believed I believe they were able to confirm it for sure as Olga and Tatiana, and there's still a bit of a dispute, I believe, of if the daughter buried with Alexei was Maria or if it was Anastasia. They also, I guess, they did find other things within the mines that they had originally placed the body in, mostly other things, not so much bodies. There was a little bit of stuff. There was the skeleton of the dog, as well as corset stays and other items that they had on them that they had taken off of them before they buried the bodies. Again, attempting to avoid identification of them. Um, let me see. I had something on this point. So there's a discrepancy that's still around to this day that hasn't been completely like resolved that the second grave with Alexei and one of the other children has still their remains have not been put with the rest of their family because despite evidence proving that it is a one in several million chance that they are not Romanovs, the uh the Catholic Church in Russia does not um claim them as Romanovs. So unfortunately
Hmm.
those two skeletons are still in they're in the uh like state library, the Russian state library, rather than they had built a church on the grounds where the house had been after they had investigated it and seen gotten an idea of what happened there, called the Church of All Saints. And in 2008, or sorry, not in 2008, in 2000, sorry, the Russian Orthodox Church did canonize the family, but not as martyrs, but passion bearers instead, which I don't know a whole lot about sainthood, other than what we've talked about. But oh, passion bearers because they weren't directly killed for their faith, essentially is so they weren't called martyrs, they were passion
So
bearers
killed unjustly, but not necessarily for
for
their.
their
Not religious persecution,
yeah.
essentially.
Um but there was a lot of intense debate beforehand of if they should be proclaimed as martyrs or not. But the family is canonized. Despite that, they don't view those two skeletons, those remains, as being Romanovs. So those bodies are still separated from the rest, which are held in the church on the site of the last house that they were kept in the site of their murder. So the hope is that someday this will be, I guess, like relooked at, that they will do so. But like the funeral they had and everything was not generally like, it's still a point of, there's a lot of people who didn't go just because there's still this underlying narrative of, one, it isn't actually them, even though we have mountains of
DNA
data to
evidence.
back up that it is them, as well as um just that general underlying, like, I guess, like grudge against what the monarchy was and what it stood for, that it just wasn't a very like attended service sort of thing. And the church was generally like, yeah, they approved it, but they weren't like gung-ho about it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, so there's a lot of weird little intricacies in that I think still show the through threads of what happened a little over 100 years ago with the original revolution and those general feelings and the propaganda that's happened over the last century, to where even 100 years later, with about the best scientific evidence we have to date of that these were the bodies of these people who were murdered, that a lot of people just don't believe it.
I think sometimes there's a level of when a lie has become so extensive that it becomes this whole like cultural thing. Being told that it was a lie, a part of you is worried that they are now lying to you again or still or just in a different way. And so I could see that being the concern. But for me personally, the fact that Russia couldn't do it and other people had to step in to do it gives me a little bit more concept that this isn't entirely imagined or made up or some sort of fiction created by the state where they'd maybe have more reason to. Um, I guess I don't know. One could argue that maybe Britain had some reasoning to try to say, yeah, look at what Russia did.
Yeah.
They're blaming us and they did it themselves. But I think other people being involved to me makes it a little bit more believable.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, I mean, I think to me, I can see where when you have a narrative like, oh, one of the children escaped, especially when you have like the government at the time blaming or like sort of saying it's like, oh, it's the king of Great Britain, it's his fault that these people are dead ultimately, right? Because it sounds like the narrative wasn't that like um they were killed by the government at all. It was that were they were killed by maybe almost like extremists. And
Yeah.
so, oh, if only Britain would have allowed them to um
Stay there, they would have been okay.
yeah, would have allowed them to seek refuge or whatever protection in Great Britain, oh, they would still be alive. And so when you have this narrative that pins the blame on another state already, like mixed with these like I think pretty widely known um or widely heard of like narratives about, oh, there's this escaped princess that really sort of romanticizes the story too when you're faced with um sort of a much sadder reality. There's also like just an unwillingness to accept that on top of like Catholic and I think, Russian Orthodoxy churches being wacko.
Yeah, but
Yeah. There's a
I could
lot with that too.
yeah, but I could
Yeah,
see a
and
preference
conditioning.
for imagining a better outcome potentially.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, the government, the like Bolshevik government in Russia, if it wasn't in its best interest to sort of have these narratives going on even,
Yeah.
in some way.
Yeah. And there's definitely, yeah, it's once you have that lie in place, I understand why you're not going to go back on that.
Yeah, it's hard
Um,
to turn around and backtrack and go, yeah, so we totally lied to you all for years. Not that people don't already think that governments do that and that conspiracy theories aren't rampant in everywhere in the world, to be quite honest.
yeah.
But it looks really, really bad to come forward and fully admit, like, yeah, we lied and that lie didn't even serve a genuine purpose. Like sometimes you can justify we lied because XYZ was happening in the world. This was done for the protection of people in our country or whatever else, where it's a little more justifiable. To lie about
Hmm.
the murder of children is in no way justifiable. So I could see where you don't want to distance yourselves as much as possible from that would be in the government's interest.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, totally on like the, and obviously there's a diverse range of opinions among just the general public, but the government being a united front, the Orthodox Church being a united front doesn't really surprise me, obviously, but it's sort of we can't pin everyone as thinking that, oh, this isn't true. But I think the general effect on the public of their opinion, even to this day, on something that happened um in our span of history a long time ago, over a lifetime ago, is just really interesting to look at. Um,
Hmm.
that is my all I have for today on this topic. If you're interested in more on specifically this topic, there's a couple documentaries out there. I also watched and found very interesting a video by Caitlin Dowdy, who is Ask a Mortician, if you've ever watched her, who went very more specifically into the identification of the Romanovs, their bodies, because that's obviously her thing as a mortician. Um, and she sort of talks about those areas of history. So if that's of interest to you, she has a video on that. There's other videos, other sources. I encourage you to look out there for when we were on the radio, we would do occasional shout outs to relevant charities that we thought were good places if you have the money, would like to donate to things related and relevant and important. But because of payola plugola rules with college radio stations being nonprofit, we couldn't do that. So we had to abstain from doing so. But since we are now our own thing, we can do so. So uh sort of relevant just because of the area and obviously what's going on in current times with the area of Russia and Ukraine. A good charity that we also mentioned briefly during our discussion of Chernobyl is the Clean Futures Fund. They do a lot of work helping out around the area of Chernobyl, and they provide aid to the people who live around that area, to the dogs who are the Chernobyl dogs who live in Pripyat and the surrounding area around the plant, as well as providing relief to Ukrainian soldiers. So if that is something you are interested in, you can donate directly, or you can get a cool shirt or a mug or something, and that money also goes to their donations. So just a little way to give back when we're talking about stuff in the area. It feels important to talk about things that are also happening now and that you can lend help to if you have the means to. With that, it's kind of sad and obviously very interesting, like new form of doing this. But final thoughts on our discussion of the Romanovs and the Anastasia impersonators.
That is incredibly depressing. Um, and you should do your best to fact check and pay attention to what's happening around you. Because to quote TikTok, next time you say, our government wouldn't do that, maybe they would.
They would. You don't know that they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, just a very, I think, such a sad story. I think arguably probably one of the like biggest sort of, I don't know, like just a really bitter bite out of like the history of Russia and like the USSR, and the founding of the USSR is just that, like what happened with the Romanov family in general. Um, I think it's honestly very, very disappointing and just, I mean, all around a very sad story. Um, yeah, it's hard to like respond to something because especially like right like I think like you said the French Revolution, it's like maybe we feel a little bit more distanced from that, and I'm not saying that a fair amount of innocent people or mostly innocent people even were not um weren't like, you know, given maybe unjust punishments, but this feels um especially heartbreaking with the just the age, and also like I don't know, that's just
When they've
like
abdicated, like they stepped
yeah.
down, they
Yeah, they
moved out
stepped
of the
down.
way. That
Hmm.
makes it feel extra unnecessary almost. Just
Yeah.
they chose to give that up and step away from the position of power, and so to then follow through with that seems really messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also hard, I think, because we, right, like, you know, we know that like other European countries who used to have very, very strong monarchies, even France has like alive, like descendants of royal families still. And like there was another way to do this, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think that's very hard.
It was never ever in a million years going to be a clean changing of the guards, but it could have been handled in a much less
Yeah.
cruel and heinous way. Um, in sort of an effort to appear powerful but also just, they not only did something horrible, but then covered it up in a way that it has irrevocably changed the story of how it
Yeah.
happened for so many people. And there are parts of it that are probably lost forever just in the chaos. But we do know, and I obviously when we sometimes our stories here are a little sad, but if history that is clean and nice and not dark and kind of like that isn't conflicting, history that isn't conflicting is propaganda in most cases. And so obviously we talk about strange, unsolved, whatever, the silly goofies, but also with us delving more into these like some of these deeper history topics or cases, I think it's an interesting way to look at how justice works, how the world has patterns of the past, things that we see, and how we can learn from them, which is obviously a big point of why we talk about history.
Mhm.
Other than that, uh, these won't all be super sad, I promise. Um, our plan is to do once a month. Um, so we'll do if we record on Thursdays, probably the first Friday of every month, unless we can figure out live streaming it also to YouTube. We'll have to see. But um Thursday, Friday, first of the month. Maybe something extra for October just for spooky month. We'll have to see what works in our schedules. But other than that, that I think does it for us for tonight for Hypothetically Speaking. Thank you so much for joining us for the first um topic. I flipped a coin between doing this one and doing the Triassic period, which obviously we was sad today is what the coin flip decided. Um but that is I think that'll be all for tonight. So thank you so much for
Mhm.
listening in, friends of the show, mom, dad. Thanks for all that. All your support. Until next time, this has been our show. Uh, it's recorded, so it feels weird to like do our name
Normal
out
sign
there.
off.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, yes, this has been us. We'll be back. Um, gosh, I can't keep stealing Braden's sign off either.
Tune
Um,
in next time
yeah,
uh for another random poll from our bag of mysteries.
absolutely. I do want to do, my next one's gonna be that skull one, whenever that is. Which I had the idea in the car today, and I think it'll be a fun one. 'Cause there's a couple I have on the radar, and I just gotta find a couple more to like, pull it
Get
in.
to talk about all kinds of fun things, like Walt Disney's missing head.
Yeah, exactly. The real Shakespeare skull, not Shakespeare's skull, but the skull that
Yeah.
was used for the monologue. There's a couple other.
Also Einstein's brain.
Einstein's brain would be a good one.
That's a good one.
Um, we're not gonna talk about what was left of Rasputin.
No, nobody needs that.
Especially because that isn't true, actually. To burst your bubble, but it's like a sea cucumber or something. I'm like 99% sure.
Nice.
If you don't know what we're talking about, good. You don't need to.
I would recommend not Googling it personally.
Yeah, definitely. If you're morbidly curious, our apologies. But until next time, that's been us. This is Hypothetically Speaking, where we talk about anything unexplained, unsolved, and unnatural. So if you want to tune in next time, we'll have another episode this October. So until then, uh, gosh, this is so hard without it. I'm just gonna one more Braden, and then we'll figure out our own thing. Stay safe, be good people, and we're out.